the weekly show with David J. Maloney. This week, David finishes his conversation with Glen Phillips of Toad the Wet Sprocket. And now, here's your host, David J. Maloney.
Welcome, everyone, to the weekly show. I'm your host, David J. Maloney. As you know, before the pandemic, we'd shoot the show before a small studio audience at the Hard Rock Hotel and Casino. And after several months of shooting the show from home, hoping we get back to our live-to-tape shows, we were not renewed for that format. Instead, we've been renewed for a new televised podcast format, which leaves us without a studio and without a studio audience, but does allow us to have so many more great guests on the show who might not otherwise be able to join us. Of course, you can still watch the show right here on your TV and on YouTube, but now you can also listen to extended interviews with our guests on our very own weekly show podcast. Please go to all of our social media platforms for more information. So on tonight's show, we've got a very special guest. He's the lead singer of one of my absolute favorite bands, Toad the Wet Sprocket. We have the pleasure of interviewing Toad's lead singer, Glen Phillips, with us again tonight for part 2 of my interview with him. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. When you guys were recording Fear, was there a feeling at all within the band, oh yeah, this is special, this is going to blow up?
No, I mean, we actually still had, the funny thing about Fear is like, I think we all liked Walk on the Ocean. We didn't put Good Intentions on that record because it was too pop. We almost didn't put All I Want on that record because it was too pop. And we were very much in this, like, no, we're an indie band, but we're like, we're making a big record, but we were thinking closer to Tears for Fears or Talk, right? And so, and All I Want, even as a single, that happened 9 months into the record. It wasn't, everybody at the record company, they all had 20/20 hindsight, and it was a hit from the first time they saw it after it was a hit, but it took them 9 months to get there. So, I mean, it was, as a recording process, we weren't thinking in terms of hits. And we actually we lucked out with our A&R guys. For that, we still had Ron Oberman. And Ron was an album guy. And, for the next album, Dulcinea, where we went back and we're like, okay, we want to make something where we can do everything live, that it's like, we wanted to make a record that was how we sounded live again, but we were a better, bigger live band. And we rocked more, and we wanted to really bring that across. But we had Chuck Plotkin, who, produced Dylan and Springsteen, as our A&R guy. And Chuck was just like, literally said, my job is to protect you from the radio people, and you make the record you want to make. And we came in and listened to the records, and I remember he's like, oh, it's a wild stew. Like, you could tell a lot of stories. Like, how do you think about sequencing? Because you're going to take people on a journey, and you really want to think about, like, what's the emotional journey, the meta, people weren't using the word meta, but what's like the larger narrative that you're trying to tell with this record? And so we lucked out. Like, when we got to our last record, and I think David Kahn was our A&R guy, he just sat there and he was like, no, it wasn't David Kahn, it was somebody else. But he just sat there and he's like, what do you think the single is? Huh. Like, that was it. And it's like, oh, this is what people talk about with A&R guys. So we'd had the best experience possible. We had total creative control, and we had people who wanted great records, and they didn't give a damn about singles. So we wanted to make a great record because we figured we were going to get dropped still. We had
all this time. You're like just figuring this is going to be each record is like, this is probably going to be the last hurrah.
No, I don't think, honestly, with Dulcinea, we weren't thinking that. With Dulcinea, we'd had a platinum record. We're like, I guess we're doing this. Like, at that point, we thought we were pros, but we were still trying to make great records. And we were still of that 90s mindset that, like, we did all the radio work. We worked hard in promotion, but at the same time, we didn't give a shit. We're like, we're a real band. You know, we're a career band, and you know, in hindsight, probably thinking more about singles and career longevity. And you know, if I could mentor my younger self, I would have a lot to say about gratitude, about being smart, about your attitude, about putting more money. I would have a lot of advice for myself.
Well, you mentioned Dulcinea, and I'm going to have a fan gushing moment for a second here. Dulcinea is honestly one of my 5 desert island albums. And that's true. It's right there for me with Joni Mitchell's Court and Spark, Blood, Sweat, and Tears, Child is Fire to the Man, Howard Jones's Human Lib, and Rush's 2112, which, in fact, I even named my boat Dulcinea after that album.
Nice.
Yes. And so today, as we record this interview, it's been exactly 28 years and a day since that album was released. Now, I think you've said before that Dulcinea might be your favorite Toad album as well. What do you think made that one so special to you?
I think I'd matured as a lyricist. I feel like I wasn't getting away with things that sounded vaguely poetic, but I didn't know what they mean anymore. So there was more intent behind it. I think the attitude of reducing songs to what we could do live and making I can go into that overproduction thing. I mean, I've just finished a solo album that I had so much fun with. I used all the tracks. I mean, and it's a ton of fun to do that. But there's something about great rock arranging, which is just like, it's, you know, I feel like there's no fluff arrangementally on that. Like we were a strong touring band. We arranged things really tightly. So it's the biggest sounding record, even though it has the least tracks, right?
Well, and it's solid throughout. I don't think there's, in my opinion, there's not a bad song on the album.
I think the songs were solid. The writing was, I think, categorically better. And we knew what we were as a band. We were trying to say, and we were at our peak. I think we were, during that record more than any other record. I also think we were playing as a team, and we were intent on doing something, great together. And I think it's really hard to do something great together if you're infighting. And by the time of Coil, I think our morale was a lot lower, and that we were a little overtaken by internal turmoil. And I also feel, I mean, you know, I love the last record we did just because those songs mean something to me now in a way that songs I wrote when I was in my early 20s don't resonate. What I'm glad about is how few of the songs from back then make me wince now. You know, meaning that I've heard bands who are now in their 50s or 60s, and if you're writing songs about, hey, little girl, after the show, let's go get busy, like there's stuff that just gets creepy or falls flat at a point. And I feel like, you know, I was dark and deep and depressed and you know, thinking about heavy things, and it's like, okay, I'm proud of the things I was thinking about. I feel like I was asking questions that were worth asking, and I'm not embarrassed about most of the subject matter as an adult.
Well, and that kind of brings up a song, one of my favorite songs, probably my favorite song on the album is Fly From Heaven. And my interpretation of that was that it was written from the perspective of James, brother of Jesus. And I'm curious if that's correct, and if the story behind writing that song was personal in some way.
That song came out of a fascination with early Christianity. So I grew up in a very California way. It was, I had a bar mitzvah in a Reformed congregation, but my dad took me to Zen meditation courses and gave me the Tao Te Ching and, books by Idris Shah on Sufism. And, so I had this like Eastern education from my father, and, and a very, in my congregation, it was an ethical background through Judaism, but not necessarily a deep spiritual background. I remember asking the rabbi when I was really young, like, I don't believe in any of this. I don't believe in God. Like, should I be here? And he's like, you don't have to believe in God to be Jewish. It's like, it's about, I sum it up as ethics and Holocaust guilt at that time. Like, where it was, it's about, no, but it was about ethics and a cultural identity, right? It's about doing the right thing. It's about understanding that history is bigger than you. And it's about being open-minded.
I want to talk about Windmills. What a beautiful song. Can you talk about how that song came about? And did that song generate the Dulcinea album name? I mean, from Don Quixote attacking a windmill, or was it the other way around, or neither?
I'm trying to think of the order. I think we had the song Windmills first. And actually, I didn't even read it. Randy was reading it. So I got a cliff notes through talking to him about it. And once again, it's about self-delusion and the as Don Quixote is, it's like both the beauty and the power and the pitfalls of telling yourself a beautiful story, right? And it's that question of, can you tell yourself a beautiful story that doesn't put you or those you love in danger, that doesn't make you have to be stupider or ignore reality? Is it an overlay that's like putting on like really beautiful glasses and all the colors pop, And I think there are degrees, like I choose to believe that the universe is an inherently loving place, and that the purpose of being a human being is to love. And I don't necessarily have a ton of proof for that. I could pick and choose. I could cherry pick. But I am willing to hold on to that as an irrational belief that I have faith in, and that I'm just going to stick to, because it doesn't make me stupid and it doesn't make me cruel. And, it's not, and I have friends of various faiths who hold similar things, where it doesn't, you can go into a position of faith and use that as a way to kind of be a safety blanket, where you're like, I'm not going to let in anything that doesn't agree with this. I'm not going to let anything that's challenge. I see people acting hateful all the time, right? People are as horrific as they are wonderful, but they are wonderful in much greater numbers and to a much greater degree. And they're all complicated. Everybody's hurting. Everybody's got a big story. Everybody's carrying a great weight and still managing to love ferociously, even if they're doing it with a ton of bizarre belief systems surrounding it, and things that seem protective to them, but maybe hateful to other people. And I hold on to that, that people are more motivated at the end of the day by love than fear, but we're ignorant, we're scared, and we're fighting for our survival. And so that, then I can forgive the cruelty to a degree.
We talked about Dean earlier, and he's a very tight bass player, and I don't think he gets enough recognition in my eyes. But it's interesting because it says a lot that here we are 30 plus years later, and all you high school buddies are still making music together. And I know you all took a break for a bit, and I even caught a few solo shows of yours during that time. I saw you once in Tallahassee, at Long Island. When the band finally got back together, was it easy or hard? Were you able to just get right back on the horse? Was it like old times immediately, or was there a little bit of distance that needed to be bridged?
Well, I mean, both. It was unfortunately kind of like old times, but with all the bad parts too.
Oh, geez.
So, I mean, at first we had a lot to burn through. I mean, we got together really young, and, I was probably, friend closest to Randy in the band, like didn't hang out a lot. We don't have a ton in common except for this kind of familial bond through the band. It's not like we're, calling each other up and going out for dinner. And so, we're really different people. And there was a lot in the band that had been hurtful and that we needed to get through and get over. And we also have really different styles as far as conflict management, psychological language, any of that. And so, you know, I think as we get older, there's just a point of acceptance of going like, everybody is who they are, and wanting them to change isn't going to change them. So putting energy into, and I think we've all done this, like just accepting we are who we are, and that we get a lot of time off and to do other things. And so whatever ways we don't meet each other, you know, I love being in situations that are more improvisational and surprising. And Toad is very, very set. We do what we do, and it sounds the way it sounds, and it's like, it is what it is, and it sounds really good, and our audience loves it, and I know how to show up and respect the audience. But if I want things to be more unpredictable, I need to go somewhere else. It's not what Toad does. And having time to kind of do my solo work where, you know, I don't have a set list and you never know where it's going to go, and stories come and go, and, you know, or the work I've done with like Sean and Sarah from Nickel Creek or other, you know, or playing with Jonathan Kingham live. It's like, there's a lot more surprise and improvisation, and I really need that. And Toad just is not that. And so it's partially just going, okay, it's not that, and let it be what it is, enjoy it for what it is, and don't force anybody to be what they aren't, you know? And I think that's been a winning strategy. You know, but we've all hurt each other a lot, and we've also been there for each other a lot. Like I said, it's familial. You know, it offers a lot of opportunities, both in, you know, the familiarity of each other and the comfort of being together, and in the challenges of being together. And it's taught me a lot.
You mentioned good intentions earlier. How did that end up on the Friends soundtrack? I guess you guys had written it first, or was it something?
Yeah, we'd written and recorded it and mixed it for the Fear album, and it was just sitting around. And you know, we were on tour and we got a call and they said, hey, the Friends soundtrack wants a song. And we're like, how about Good Intentions? Okay. So,
and there it was.
Yeah. a lot of the movie stuff in those days, you know, you'd have extra tracks after a record, and then Sony would be doing a soundtrack, and
there it would be.
And that's where the B-sides went.
Yeah. Although with One of Those Days, which you guys did for the movie Animal Crackers, that one you actually wrote for the movie, right?
Yeah. He was cold calling bands. He put that movie together, like, kind of amazingly, like, for the budget they did it for and the resources they had. And he was just like, I'm calling all the bands I want on the soundtrack. We don't have a big budget. Don't know if we'll get distributed, but I'm going to make this damn movie no matter what. And so it's like, okay.
I'll go back in time for a minute, because we kind of skipped over Coil. And although, like I mentioned, Dulcinea is certainly my personal favorite, Coil was incredible as well. And I think it was your highest charting album. What was the feeling within yourself and the band going into the studio for that record?
I mean, we were excited. We felt like we were a strong band. We had a ton of songs going in. There was a bit of division in the band at that point, but also we wanted to make a great album, and we went against the head of the company. He wanted us to work with, who was it who did like Jerry Harrison. Everybody was, you know, live and Crash Test Dummies, and they were having hits with him, and they're like, you got to work with Jerry Harrison. We're like, we're going to work with Gavin because he's our guy. And we were actually told by the head of the company, it's like, okay, you work with him, but your record's going to stop as soon as we're recouped. I will end your record. And they did precisely that, actually. Like, we put out the record, it charted quickly, we had a single, and then they're like, that's it. We broke even, you're done. And that hurt. And you know, once again, it's not sour grapes if they tell you they're going to do it before they do it. Yeah. And they told us they were going to do it. And like, literally that was the punishment for working with Gavin. They pulled the plug as soon as they made their money back.
You mentioned earlier about the difference with, spontaneity, with your solo work, and your solo sound is different clearly than your Toad sound. And so does the idea of, for example, your sofa shows, which you started, I think, doing much more of since the pandemic.
I've done 200 something.
Yes. Does that give you that opportunity to have that spontaneity that you want, where there's just, I know you take requests on these things where you just...
I kind of thought we'd be shut down for 3 months, right? And so when I started doing them, I was doing...
We all did.
I know. And so I was doing a Stage It on Sundays, and I started by doing 5 live streams a week.
Yeah.
I did that for like 2 or 3 weeks, and then I went to 3. And I also do community choir leading in town, and I switched that to online, where I use a looper and like loop up the parts, and people would sing along from home on Zoom. And so I was doing 5 shows a week for pretty much a year and a half. In the comments, there came out of that to be a real community that have now come to shows in real life. They have dinner together. There have been a couple. There's one couple in England and one couple in the States. A couple getting married that met in the chats of those shows. And so really beautiful community. They made me a birthday, like a yearbook of, their stories and where they're from. And so they really showed up for each other. And so that part of it, I'm incredibly proud of.
And you play a lot of your songs, Toad songs, and covers on these shows. What song, and it doesn't necessarily have to do with these shows, I'm just curious myself personally, what song, whether it be yours or someone else's, gives you, Glenn, the absolute most joy to either listen to or play?
The answer to that song is, it's still, for me right now, there's a song called No Hard Feelings by the Avett Brothers that is just a perfect song. And it's just one of those, I wonder what happens when I die songs. But just lines like, when the sun hangs low in the west and the light in my chest won't be kept held at bay any longer, right? It's even this idea of death is just getting to be too big for your body and having to expand into something else. And it's just, who knows what's on the other side, but it's such a beautiful song.
Where can our audience go to follow you and the band on social media and elsewhere?
It's Facebook /Toad the Wet Sprocket or Glen Phillips Music. And I'm on Instagram as Glen Phillips Music, and I think also on Twitter. And yeah, just Google it. It's all there.
Thank you so much, Glenn.
Follow, smash, all those things.
Glenn, thank you so much for being on the show. This has been an absolute, to use the word earlier, joy for me. Ladies and gentlemen, Glen Phillips of Toad the Wet Sprocket.
That's our show for tonight. Thank you so much for watching. A special thanks to Glen Phillips of Toad the Wet Sprocket for joining us. Stay safe, everyone.
Now we crossed the broken bond of trust.